Hey everyone, and welcome to American History. I'm so excited to have you guys in class this semester. So, before we get started on our first section of notes, I kind of want to just go over the fill in the blank notes again real quick. I know I did this in class, but I just want to make sure you guys understand how to fill out the notes as we go. So, this document will be posted on Google Classroom, or if you'd already asked, I've already given you a paper copy. So, when it comes to fill in the blank notes, these bold headings means that is a new section of notes. So for example, today's lecture is going to be just the Trail of Tears, meaning we're going to fill out this first page today. So when it gets to a slide, we'll use this one as an example. See how we have Andrew Jackson up here as a heading? That is what you will put here on this first blank, okay? And then after that, you will just go through that slide and fill out the blanks as we go along. Now, I will give you time before I start talking about each slide to fill out your fill-in-the-blank notes. Now, these videos are here for you if you need to go back later and get caught up or if you're gone for the day. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So again, our first section of notes today is on the Trail of Tears. So starting off with Andrew Jackson, our president at the time, he was elected in 1828. He was in office from 1829 to 1837, so he served 2 terms. And it was during his presidency, decades-long conflicts between white people and Native Americans over tribal lands truly came to a head. The U.S. wanted these tribal lands for farming, building plantations, and huge profits. However, the Native Americans would not sell. So they were trying to think, how can we get rid of them? And part of that was the Indian Removal Act, passed by Congress in 1830. This allowed the government to negotiate with Native Americans for removal west of the Mississippi River in exchange for their homelands. Now, under the Indian Removal Act, and that is the official title, they had identified the quote-unquote 5 civilized tribes. Now, mind you, that is just their view of that. Now, specifically, it was targeted at the Choctaws, Cherokees, Chickasaws, Creeks, and Seminoles, who resided in what mostly we could consider today to be modern Georgia, Florida, and Alabama and Mississippi, that general southeastern region of the United States. And they wanted their tribal lands there. Now, this paved the way for the forced migration of tens of thousands of Native Americans to the west of the Mississippi River, specifically to Indian Territory, as they refer to it, or if you're looking at a modern-day map, it is the modern-day state of Oklahoma. And if you know anything about the U.S. geography, you know Georgia and Florida are pretty well in terms of the environment and the ability to grow crops and that sort of thing. Now think about Oklahoma for a second. These are 2 very distinct different locations. So for a lot of tribes being forced to migrate there, they would then struggle once they arrived because they didn't know how the environment worked. So here's a good map for you. Again, this is kind of showing where each of the main groups, you have your Chickasaw and Choctaw in what would be Mississippi, the Creek and Cherokee in Alabama and Georgia, and the Seminoles in Florida. These purple out here in what would be eventually Nebraska, Kansas, and Oklahoma, and a little bit of Missouri, like just this little edge right here, was considered to be Indian territory, or land granted to the Native Americans in exchange for their lands out here. So the Cherokee actually tried to go through as many legal ways to stop this as possible. They even got so far as going to the Supreme Court in the case of Worcester v. Georgia. The Cherokee sued for their land. And here's the kicker. The Supreme Court sided with the Cherokee, that the U.S. had no right to take their land. However, President Jackson refused to enforce the Supreme Court ruling. He said, whatever, we're still going to kick them out anyway. Which then resulted in the Trail of Tears. Now, this is the forced removal of Cherokee Nation that was ordered in 1838. Their forced removal became known as the Trail of Tears, and it was an 800-mile march from North Georgia to Oklahoma. They were led by well-armed U.S. soldiers, and they left so late in the year they marched through the winter. Roughly a quarter of the Cherokee Nation died while on the Trail of Tears. This is the most famous example of Indian relocation in U.S. history, and by far one of the saddest. Now, a little bit more about that. All of the 5 civilized tribes that we talked about, so again, the Choctaws, the Chickasaws, the Cherokee, the Seminoles, and the Creeks, all experienced their own Trail of Tears. Many went peacefully. Some did not. The Seminoles did not want to leave their ancestral homes of what would eventually be designated as the Everglades in Florida. They started to fight a series of wars with U.S. forces. There are roughly 3 that we associate with them, and they fiercely resisted for decades. They were the last Native American group from that region to be forcefully migrated to Oklahoma. I want to say they were able to last out until the 1870s, if I remember correctly, in terms of their resistance. Now, the effects. By 1883, so not even 50 years after the Cherokee were forced on their Trail of Tears, there were 25 reservations in Indian Territory that combined 37 tribes and had a population of about 100,000 Native Americans. A third of those that were relocated died on the march west, whether that be from disease, starvation, or exposure to the elements. It also caused a lot of untold suffering for those people. It permanently changed tribal society and culture for them as well, mainly because their cultures were so heavily tied to the lands that they had left. A major tenet of Native American society and culture is the respect of the land. So when you move them from one place to another and they no longer know the land, they don't have a way to keep their culture alive because they can't do the same things they did before. All right, that is it for notes for today. I'll see you all next time. Bye, everyone.